Jenny Truong. I work at stately.ai, and right now I am so stressed. I'm stressed because this is my second time speaking on stage, but I'm also stressed just because this is terrifying. Show of hands, how many of you are stressed? Yes, look at all those hands. Thank you for recognizing that you're stressed. But I'm here to remind you that stress isn't really that bad for you. This is a state machine of my interpretation of stress. It's my stress machine. So before I teach you about what state machines are, I'm going to go over some terminology so then you can understand like what this means. A state machine is just a visual interpretation of how a process works. And so these boxes that you see, those are states. You can only be in one state at a time. That not stress state is a finite state. And then we have the arrow, then we have the dot with an arrow extending from it. That is initial state. Every process has an initial state, and that's where our machine begins. Then you see the arrows, those are referred to as transitions, and the text in between those arrows, those are called events. So in my stress machine, you can see that we start at the non-stress state. When I wake up, I'm not stressed. I don't feel anything. I'm numb. When my body starts releasing cortisol, my brain's just like cortisol release, then I start getting fear responses. I in the event of cortisol being released, I transition from the not stress state to this fear response state. Within this fear response state, all the energy in my body starts like going up to my brain, and it enhances the way that like I touch, feel, smell, hear things. And that's what happens when cortisol is released in my brain. In the event that adrenaline gets released, I transition from the not stress state into this fight or flight state. Fight or flight, when I think of that, I think of myself being Mario. When Mario gets adrenaline, all of a sudden he just becomes Super Mario and he feels invincible. And this adrenaline helps you boost your heart rate up. And it also helps you kind of feel numb because it reduces the way you feel pain, or actually enhances your pain tolerance physically. And so you could run for about an hour until that adrenaline dies down. So now that we understand what stress is, it's a natural chemical that is released in our body, and it's cortisol and adrenaline just kind of like coming at you at once. We can understand that, stress can become a physical toll on us, and little bits of stress at a time, like short bursts of stress at a time, is actually normal. It's the way that we can survive. It's the way that helps us recognize that, okay, we're here, we're present. I want you to also understand that stress is different from burnout. Burnout is stress that leads you into a workplace that causes you to feel like overwhelmed, and that stress extends to a long period of time, and then like all of a sudden you're just like, oh my gosh, you get confused and a little delusional. That's what most people think is what burnout is. And understanding that stress is actually different from burnout, you can have stress without burnout, but you can't have burnout without stress. Stress leads to burnout. And so now you're here probably thinking, okay, am I stressed? Am I burnt out? Which one am I? Well, an easy way to remember and understand like where you are is, or let's say, I need to rephrase that. An easy way to recognize if you are burnt out and not stressed is that when you're burnt out, you start having thoughts like, oh, I wish I could eat my meal. I wish I could have lunch right now. Or I wish I could just go home after 5 p.m. or maybe turn off my notifications. Or I wish I had time to sleep, but I have insomnia because I keep thinking about all the tasks that I have to finish doing in my backlog. Or you just start feeling guilty for wanting like reasonable things that you have been doing before you started working this job. Burnout is related to the current work that you're doing at your job. And so when I start recognizing when I feel these feelings and thoughts of like, I just want to sleep, but I can't. I have to stay up and finish this presentation. I think of the 4 happy chemicals, which is DOSE. DOSE stands for dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. So this is a fun tips and tricks that I want you all to try to do at home. And we'll go through every single chemical. It's a neurotransmitter that our brain signals to our body to like lessen the amount of stress that we feel. And so with dopamine, it's kind of like a reward system. So in order for me to release some dopamine, I could post something on Twitter and then wait like 30 minutes and then look at my notifications. That is a way to get dopamine, like right here and now. Another thing that I do is that I don't do this every morning. I do this maybe once a week. If I wake up and then stress hits my body and I get a little bit like overwhelmed or like nervous, I'm just like, okay, I want to release dopamine. So let me go in the mirror, or if you aren't that type of person that likes to talk to yourself in the mirror, just write this down. Write 3 things down that you're grateful for. So for right now, to release some dopamine, 1, I'm grateful for these shoes. I just bought these shoes like a couple of days ago, and I'm wearing them on stage, and they fit, and they're comfy. 2, I'm grateful for a good hair day. My hair looks great today, I think. And 3, I'm grateful to be on stage in front of you all talking about mental health and developer health and state machines. Next up on the 4 happy chemicals, we have oxytocin. This chemical, you can think of it as like a warm and fuzzy chemical. So there are times where you might feel lonely or kind of disconnected. To release some oxytocin in your body, you can just give yourself a nice big hug and squeeze and like count to 3, and you're like, okay, I feel a little bit better. It's the same chemical that is released when you are blushing. When you feel your face getting warm and a little red, that's oxytocin getting released in your body. And if you don't feel like giving yourself a hug, that's fine. I thought it was weird the first time I did it, but just go on YouTube and look up some puppy or kitten videos. After like 2 minutes of watching them, you're gonna feel like the oxytocin getting released in your body. Next, we have serotonin. Before I talk about serotonin, I wanted you all to do an activity with me. So we're gonna skip it and actually go to endorphins. Endorphins is like when you're running and you get like that runner's high, that's endorphins. But it's also another way of your body just kind of like releasing like it's releasing chemicals to help you feel less pain. So it's endorphins get released when you also release adrenaline. An easy way, if you don't feel like moving, is to eat some chocolate. I forgot the amount of chocolate, but eat half a bar of the American-sized chocolate, not in one sitting, but over time, and when your body starts digesting it, let's say 15, 20 minutes later, you'll feel the endorphins start kicking in. If you want an immediate kick of endorphins in your body, just start moving. Do what Taylor Swift said and just shake it off. Okay, back to serotonin. This will be a really fun activity. So I want you all to laugh with me. And what I mean is that we're gonna count to 10 in laughs. So ha, ha, ha. Come on, join me on 3. Ha, ha, ha. Ha, 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 ha. Ha, 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 ha. Ha, 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 ha. So I only got to maybe 6 or 7, and I've never made it to 10, and I encourage you to try to do this because our body doesn't know the difference between a fake laugh and a real laugh. So if you just kind of mimic laughter, your body's going to naturally just like start laughing, and you're going to start feeling better, and your shoulders are going to start like not being so tense, and they'll loosen up. And that's where self-awareness is the key to understanding like where you are physically, emotionally, mentally. When you're able to recognize how you're feeling, you can say it out loud, or you can reflect on it and just sit in the thought, and just it's you being honest to yourself, and it's you being vulnerable for you. Burnout is not about stress, it's what stress costs you. So when you're feeling overwhelmed and stressed, do one of these 4 dose activities, and then sit in that moment and go back to the thought of like, why was I feeling overwhelmed? Why was I feeling stressed? This state machine right here is how I'm currently feeling. I am very aware that I am hangry because it's the morning. I haven't had breakfast. I haven't had coffee. I'm thirsty. I'm hungry. I'm angry. All of it, hangry. This is my hangry machine. And so going back to the previous terms, we have the initial states. You can see here, you also have the events and transitions, which is the arrows and the text between the arrows. What you see with those dotted boxes, those are parallel states, which is a combination of states. Within hangry, we have the hunger state and the anger state. The hunger state is actually a parent state to two child states. When you're hungry, you transition into satisfied by eating, right? When you're satisfied, after a while, you get hungry again. For me, it's usually like 2 hours, but it also depends on what I eat. When I'm angry, when I'm angry, you can either eat or wait. After a period of time, you'll calm down and you'll become content again. But if something like ticks you off and then you become like really upset, that's going to make you back to angry. It'll transition you back to angry. And so with this parallel states, I can sit in the state of being hungry and angry. So even though we're all hangry, I'm assuming you're all hangry with me, hopefully you can sit and learn about the different states of burnout, because it's really important to have that self-awareness and self-recognition. Burnout was originally discovered in the 1970s by a psychologist who's a German-American, Dr. Herbert Freudenberger. He originally discovered that there were 12 states of burnout. Burnout is technically defined as the consequences of severe stress in high helping professions. I'm not going to go over all 12 states of burnout with you because that's going to be a little bit overwhelming, but I will go over the most 5 common states of burnout that we experience. And it all starts in this honeymoon phase. So within my burnout machine, we all start in this honeymoon phase of like, you get this job, or maybe you get this role, or you get promoted to this position that you are so excited about. And you decide, oh my gosh, I'm going to put all my energy, I'm going to work more than 9 to 5, and I'm going to take on all these tasks that my coworkers don't want to do, and then I'll do them because I absolutely love that I'm here. With taking on those tasks, you also develop some type of stress because you don't know how to manage your time. You're so excited still, and you're so optimistic that you can still complete all these things. And that overwhelmingness that you're feeling, it will lead to some type of anxiety or irritability. The next state that you'll transition into is this chronic stress, where you start having some type of social withdrawal. Like you start feeling like you're not yourself. You're questioning, like, can I actually do this job? Why did they hand it over to me? Why did I say yes? Like you start having second guesses, and imposter syndrome starts kicking in. And then you'll transition into a burnout state. This burnout state will be physically and emotionally and mentally exhausting. And this is where you forget what your life is outside of work. You forget who you are. You sense the lack of joy, the things that you used to do, like walking your dog in the morning or eating breakfast. You're just like, nah, I'll skip it. We'll just work. And you start losing yourself and your identity. Most people don't transition into this habitual burnout state, but if you do get here, this is where I recommend that you try to seek external help, because it's really hard to even recognize where you are and who you are anymore at this habitual burnout state. It's very important that you understand it. Within any burnout state, it's detrimental to you being human. So now that we understand the 5 common states of what burnout is, I want to help you also recognize the different paths that you can take to recovering from feeling burnt out, whether you're in the honeymoon state and you don't want to transition into the next state where you're just feeling overwhelmed and stressed from taking on too much, or staying after work, like until working till midnight. I want to help you recognize where you are and help you transition into which state that you would prefer to be in. These are just notes that I have that you don't have to read, but I'll go over one of the roads to recovery that you can choose. There's 3 that you can start with. There's many more to choose from, but these are the 3 that I started with, and you can do them in any order. The first one is mental distance. You need to recognize that you have these expectations that you put on yourself, and sometimes they're not reasonable. You also have expectations that you put on other people. Like you expect your boss to tell you what to do every day, or you expect your boss to hand off tasks to you. But what you don't realize is that they can also hand off that task to your other coworkers. They chose you first just because they knew that you said yes before. So now they just expect you to say yes always. But that's where you reset those expectations and you say, you know what, I can't take this on. I actually have too much going on, and this is not something that that is priority on my list. But if you want to make it priority, we can rearrange on my to-do list, like what I have next. Once you reset those expectations and you voice them out loud, then you also remind yourself of putting yourself first. That's where resetting the priorities come in, and you don't experience compassion fatigue. Compassion fatigue usually happens in helping professions. And as developers, we are a helping profession. We are making tools. We're developing them to help make people's lives easier, make processes easier. So you are in a helping profession. Compassion fatigue usually happens very common in the open source world, because people are just constantly fixing problems and they're doing it for free out of their own time. And that's where most of the developers that work in open source experience burnout. Then we have this loss of confidence. You feel less than. Again, you don't have to read the slides. I'll summarize it for you. But within this recovery state of trying to regain your confidence, you have to build your internal validation. That means patting yourself on the back every single time you do something that you want a reward from, or you did something and you're like, you know what, this is good. I like this decision. I did that. Pat yourself on the back. Compliment yourself. Look in the mirror and say, I'm going to have a good day because you look good. And don't worry, if you're not the type of person to compliment yourself, you don't have to worry about your head getting too big, because you will always keep yourself in check. The fact that you even circle back to you look good, and you're like, is that too much? No, I didn't do that today. I didn't do that this week, so I look great. Next, we have implementing our boundaries. So it's kind of similar to the first one, but these boundaries are for yourself to boost your confidence. It's not just, at this point, you're stressed, you're burnt out, everything in your life is like a blur, whether it's work related or personal. You got to reset your boundaries in general. Boundaries and priorities go line in line, but boundaries are where you firmly stand on where you are and okay, I can't say yes all the time to all my friends and family for being at events. I can take this time to myself and revisit them another time, for example. Or let's see, put boundaries up of your friends when you're like, okay, yeah, I can go out next week, but then the day comes along and you're still not, you feel like you haven't recovered yet. Just tell them, we'll reschedule. I'm so sorry, I'm not feeling great. And they are your friends if they are understanding. You have to remember that. You have to surround yourself with people that will also lift you up. You have to be patient too. This is not an easy process. No matter which state of burnout that you are in, the fact that you recognize it, the fact that you can sit in it and rethink okay, is this true? Am I feeling stressed? Am I feeling overwhelmed? Is this task something that I am capable of? You ask yourself these questions, and if you're able to answer them, great. If you're not, you will be able to answer them. And pat yourself on the back when you do answer them. One of the next steps of this recovery for burnout is emotional exhaustion. This is where I started. When I started feeling, oh my gosh, I am a people pleaser. So I always say yes to everyone, and I'm always trying to be as productive as ever. And I'm doing the most of everything that I can for friends, family, my dogs, people around me that I don't even know, but I try to help them. That's me being a people pleaser, and I'm just over exhausting myself on all these different capabilities that I can do. Emotional exhaustion includes mental, physical, spiritual, creative, ways of how we can, thinking of ideas is a creative way of how you can help someone else. that's you exerting too much of your emotional side onto someone else. When you redefine being productive, you can decide, I can either help this person, or I can just tell them, like, I'm sorry, I can offer you what you need from me, but I'm also struggling with whatever I am in my head. So you have to put those boundaries up and redefine what I need to do next, and also put yourself first. If you're not in a state to help someone, just tell them I can't help you. They're not going to be mad. And if they are mad, they chose to be mad. So let that die down, and then go talk to them when they're reasonable. Within this emotional exhaustion, I also discovered that there are 7 areas of rest. If you want to look more into those 7 areas of rest, I can go over them now, but if you want to look more into it, I have these notes on the slide. Dr. Sandra Dalton Smith discovered that there are 7 types of rest for you to recover. It's not just about sleeping it off or taking a shower, forgetting about what's going on temporarily, and then like jumping back into it. This machine right here is all the 7 areas of rest. They are all parallel states. You can actually do multiple at a time. You can do a combination of like a creative, emotional rest, or you can decide to just pick one. But I would say start with 1, roll a dice, 1 through 7, pick one, and then try it out. You don't have to do it every day, but you can just experiment and get to know more about you and what your capabilities are. So, like I said, these are just notes, but within physical rest, there's active and passive. Passive rest is where you sleep and you make sure that you go through the most REM cycles that you can, because the more REM cycles that your brain goes through, the better you will feel like the next morning that you wake. Active stretching is when you are in the awake state, and let's say you go get a massage, or you stretch, or you just sit in a comfortable way where you're not feeling like uncomfortable. Mental rest is where you create a to-do list and it takes no effort, or maybe you look at your to-do list that you already have, and then you just check them off the list and you're like, okay, done. Or even go cook. Take a mental rest and go do something that you're used to doing. It's a routine that you are used to doing that you don't need to put too much thought into. Then we have a social rest where you don't have to talk to people. You want to sit in silence. Let's say after this event, I need to socially rest. I just need to go hide in a room by myself in peace and quiet, and I don't want to like talk to anyone for like 10 minutes. That's me taking a social rest. A spiritual rest is where you do something that benefits others. It has no benefit to you other than mentally, but it's the fact that you're volunteering and you're helping others and you're being a part of an organization, or it's a religion that you can pick up that helps you believe in something external. And then there's lastly sensory rest, which is just taking a break from your phone. For example, you can listen to soothing music, take a bubble bath with some lavender in the air and some wine in your hand. That's what I do. And I'm imagining right now, and it's making me feel really nice. But take a sensory rest of like just closing your eyes and like not doing anything. So in that parallel state machine that you saw earlier, a creative sensory rest that I've done is I put random things I find around the house in a Ziploc bag, and then I go into a dark room, or maybe I just put a blindfold on and I mix them up, and then I just start feeling the different items, and I'm being creative with the way that like my touch and my my touch is getting enhanced by the fear of not being able to see. I use that cortisol to my advantage, and I just start feeling all these different items and guess and make it a game. And that's me doing a creative sensory rest. Oh, there's more. I can't count to 7. I'm sorry. I only laughed up to 6. There's emotional rest too, where you basically just tell people, I can't help you right now. It's what we covered earlier. And prior to working in tech, I was a cosmetologist. So I was really in a helping profession where I'm constantly trying to please people and make sure they leave the salon happy. And having to deal with all that stress was very overwhelming. And so with me taking an emotional step towards resting emotionally, I just say, okay, I'll be completely honest, and I can't do this work for you, but maybe another technician can do that work for you. Or tell them another salon would be able to service them if they're not being a nice customer. That's me taking an emotional rest and standing up for myself. Then we have creative rest, which you go outside. You go do something that you haven't done in a while. Expose yourself to a different environment that you're not comfortable in. If you're at home all the time, go work at a cafe. That's a creative rest that could basically help you feel a little bit better about the type of work that you're doing if you haven't reached like that burnout state yet and you're only in the honeymoon phase. Change it up, and so your brain doesn't fall into this routine. Remember, it all starts with you. You have to be honest with yourself. You have to recognize the state of where you are at. And then you have to decide, do I want to transition into this state? Do I want to transition to another state? Or do I want to stay here? If I'm happy here, then you just keep your routine the way it is. But most of us don't really sit back and like take in, okay, how am I feeling? Where am I right now? What are my thoughts on like the current work that I'm doing? We don't take that time to do that. You have to prioritize you, and you have to understand the productivity rate that you are working at, so then you don't like become overproductive and then just forget about you and then lose yourself. You have to perform at a rate that you are comfortable with and that makes you feel still human. Because in the end, we're just humans trying to live life. Thank you so much, everyone. I'm gonna take a selfie so then I get some dopamine later. Thank you, everyone.